And welcome back to Chicago Bulls Insider. Today, we're talking about if the Chicago Bulls can do one thing that will change the direction of this team. And so, before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Buzelis slam dunks in games. And so, in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. Make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so, with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we are talking about if the Chicago Bulls can do one thing to change their future. And so let's start with Billy Donovan. And so starting with the good things here that Billy Donovan brings to the Chicago Bulls is I think that he's terrific with the younger players. I do like how he was able to bring Modest Buzelis along very slowly last season. And I do see that that is going to be a huge benefit for him going into year number 2. And I think that with Billy Donovan, he's done a great job considering the circumstances because Billy Donovan, ultimately, he has probably a say, but he's not the one making the decision on draft night. And so he's just given the roster and he's going out there and doing the best that he possibly can do with what he has. Now, on the other side of this thing, I think that you can look at the other argument. Several people will probably be in the comments, and you can see it across other Bulls content creators that, a lot of people maybe look at Billy Donovan as a coach that should not be with the Chicago Bulls. And so I will just say that when you look at some of the adjustments that need to be made out there on a game-to-game basis, I think that that is something that you have to question there. And then also, too, just looking at sometimes with just the lineups and things like that, I find that interesting. I think that one of the things that I talked about last season, with Billy Donovan is that you actually have some players in the front court that you could play as far as maybe running like some double centers out there with Vooch and then Zach Collins or Jalen Smith and Zach Collins and things like that. And so I just found it interesting that the Bulls never took a chance to run those type of lineups out there and see if they could have maybe dominated teams with the size. And so, it's the adjustments and then also to the willingness to try different things. And so, one would wonder, could a coaching change maybe change the way things maybe shape out for the Chicago Bulls? I mean, when you look at the fact that Billy Donovan is the third longest tenured coach in the NBA behind Steve Kerr, and then also to Coach Spoelstra, both of those coaches have won NBA championships. And then you have Billy Donovan that just got the extension here. And so you would wonder, would a coach like a Mike Malone, just throwing him out there as an example, would he be maybe a coach that could maybe change things around quickly? I'll leave it to you guys. That is that the one thing that the Bulls could do to maybe change the direction of the team? And so the next thing that I want to talk about as maybe a possible thing that could change the direction of the team is the front office, right? And so when you look at Mark Eversley and then also too, what AK has done, I think that one could maybe just wonder, could that maybe be what the Bulls need to change the direction here? Because when you look at just the way that this team has traded away players, for the one-for-one stuff, like I'm not sure that that's necessarily going to work. I mean, we'll find that out. This is a team that just really hasn't gone out and gotten additional draft capital, which we've talked about that numerous times, that if you are trying to win and you're trying to really reshape your roster and get it going in the right direction, you need to have multiple bites at the apple. And so this team has not done that. And then also too, you just wonder when you hear some of these reports that say, okay, there's teams that they don't necessarily want to do business with the Chicago Bulls, just don't understand, kind of what they're trying to do as a front office. I think that you have to kind of ask yourself as a Bulls fan, could it be a front office change that could really maybe change the direction of this team? And so I think that that is something that we definitely have to think about there. And so the next thing to think about with the Chicago Bulls, and as far as just, these trades and things like that, is just, could it be trade assets? Is it something that, you're still with the front office and everything else? And is it just the matter of trading differently, like trading more smart? And so talking about this, like when you're looking at players like Nikola Vucevic and then also to a guy like Kevin Huerter, these are two players that are going to be, coming in on expiring contracts. is it now about moving players, not just for the one for one type of swap and stuff like that, and just thinking about, okay, how can I help this team right now? But then starting to look and say, okay, how do I get some additional draft capital out of this? Does this mean that I'm trading off one of these players, and then maybe, you're getting into trades where you are now taking on maybe a bad contract? And so I'm just giving an example here. Last season, Marcus Smart, I think that Lonzo Ball was linked to Marcus Smart in a possible Memphis Grizzlies, Chicago Bulls trade there. And that would have meant that the Bulls would have maybe took on, I think, Marcus Smart there, which at the time, I guess, a bad contract, but you maybe get the draft capital. And eventually what you would have to do is maybe you think about buying him out. Now, that's something that the Bulls have not done. And so that's what I'm talking about when it comes down to getting more assets. Are you willing to possibly, buy out a contract that maybe has a year or two or something like that to go ahead and move that out the way because you do get the draft capital, get some draft assets and things like that? Are you willing to come off of players that are on this 1 year expiring contract? And yes, they help your team out, but maybe you're looking for 2 or 3 or 4 moves down the line here. And so that means that you would come off of, a Kevin Huerter, you would come off of a Vooch, you would definitely come off, Zach Collins, and then you would have to consider, your other expiring contracts, which we're going to talk about that in a moment. And then, it would come down to being more aggressive. And so, this team really didn't make midseason trades, I think, until last season. And so that's something that would definitely have to change. And so could it be going out there, being aggressive, and actually going for trade assets and just setting yourself up down the line as a team? Could that be something that changes the direction? And so the next thing I would say is, could it be an all-in trade? And so that means that looking at a couple of your expiring contracts here in Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu, I'm not in the camp of moving off of either of those players, but those are some expiring contracts that I think that a lot of teams are going to be definitely, looking to acquire. Because when you look at Kobe White, we talked about this in yesterday's video, him being ranked at the top top 25, 26 two guards in the NBA here. He's at 12, and I think that there's a chance that really he could be even higher at the end of the season. And I think maybe you could argue a little bit that he could be higher. But nevertheless, Kobe White is a guy that has gotten it done once he's gotten a consistent role. Then on top of that, with Kobe White, what I love about him and Ayo Dosunmu too is that these guys have shown that they can adapt to situations out there. And so a lot of players in this league, sometimes they need to have the situation, kind of lined up for them and things like that. Between these two players, they have that it factor. And so I think that their value goes up even more than what you see on the stat sheet. But not to get away from the point, would you be all in on a trade that you would be willing to go ahead, throw some picks in along with, two of your best expiring contracts for a guy like Giannis? And so I say that because there were the rumors out there for a Giannis. And I think that there is definitely some fans that have said that, hey, they would maybe be all in on going out and getting a star. Now, if you do that, obviously you're giving up, your young core. You would be giving up draft capital. Yes, you would be in a bit of a win now situation, but you have got to ask yourself, how would you build this thing out with what you have left? And just really that timeline is so short. But do you think that that is one of the things that the Bulls should do to change directions here with this franchise? And so the next thing that I wanted to talk about with this franchise is just this. Do they just stay the course? Do they stay the same? And that means that you do go ahead, you take care of Josh Giddey, which I think that they are ultimately going to, either way, they're going to get a deal done. I think it happens here. And then you have Modest Mazelis, you have Kobe White, you have Ayo Dosunmu, you still have Dalen Terry, you still have Julian Phillips, you still have, a young Isaac Okoro. Like you have like this young core, and you still have your pick, and you do have a chance to go out and maybe move, a Kevin Huerter or Vooch or somebody like that, and you can still get maybe some draft capital back or maybe a player back that can help you right now as you are trying to build. If you want to go with the same direction of just using one pick every year in the first round and one pick in the second round, I mean, it's going to take you some time. But do you think that the current path that the Chicago Bulls is on is the best as well. And so I'd love to hear what your thoughts are because, we do have Modest, who I think is set to take a step forward this year. And also, too, a guy like Noah Asingay, who I think really we've talked about him, but I don't know if he's talked about enough, especially when you hear just some of the characteristics of Noah Asingay and how he approaches the game a lot like Modest Buzelis. And I've said this before, if he can just mimic what Modest Buzelis did in year one, if Billy Donovan, who I said at the start here has been good for these young players as far as bringing them along slowly, if he can do that same thing with Noah Asingay, you can imagine if you have two players now, you have Modest Buzelis and Noah Asingay, along with Kobe White and Josh Giddey and some of these other younger players on the roster, you are definitely starting to go in the right direction. And so you guys let me know, do the Bulls stay with their current path and direction? Do you think that that is best for their future? Do you think that the Bulls should be looking to trade all in for a superstar like a Giannis? Just throwing him out there as an example because he was in the trade rumor with the Chicago Bulls there. Or do you think it's just a matter of just managing your trade assets? And so just talking about a guy like a Kevin Huerter, a guy like Vooch, who we talk about often, you still do have, Ayo, you still have Kobe White, you still have, Javon Carter, just players that I'm thinking of that are on expiring deals. Is it just more so managing those processes better? Is that something that is going to change the course of this franchise? Do you think that it's the front office? Do you think that the front office, look, they've got to go? Is it the fact that just teams around the league cannot figure them out? They seem to be, a front office that it seems to be difficult to deal with as far as trying to get some stuff done. Do you think that it's that needs to change for the Bulls to go in a different direction? And lastly, do you think it's the coaching? Do you think that Billy Donovan and just getting another head coach here would be the answer to get this team in the right direction? And like I said before, I was just using Michael Malone as an example. There's tons of other coaches out there. Heck, Tibbs is out there. And so I'm just thinking of players that just have achieved, a lot here, and they're jobless at this point as far as not being head coaches in the NBA. And so you guys let me know. And again, remember, is there one fix? I know that there's several fixes together that, definitely have to happen, but do you think that there's one that maybe just gets this team going in the right direction? And so that's where I'm kind of at with this thing. I think that there's multiple things that you can attack this with, but wanted to ask the question, is there one that you think? And so you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking here. And as we always say, look, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.